We hear all the time about this so-called loneliness epidemic, right? But what about the people who seem to be doing the exact opposite? In this explainer, we're going to dive into the psychology of people who can cut ties and just walk away without ever looking back.
Okay, just picture this for a second. You get a text. It's from that one person, you know the one, who just seems to suck the life out of you. And there's no pause, no thinking about a polite way to reply. You just delete it. You cut them off. It's this clean, decisive move that, honestly, a lot of people just don't get. They might even call it cold.
And here's the part that really gets people. What happens next? Society tells you that you should feel guilty or sad or some sense of loss. But instead, what you feel is this overwhelming wave of peace, a quiet relief. And that's the paradox that makes everyone so uncomfortable. So that leads to the big question. How in the world did you get here? Because let's be honest, you weren't always like this. To really understand the person you are right now, we have to go back and look at the person you used to be. Let's trace this whole thing back to the beginning.
For years, maybe even decades, you played a completely different role. You weren't the person putting up boundaries. You were the person who didn't even know what a boundary was. You were the emotional anchor for literally everyone else.
Does any of this sound familiar? You were the peacekeeper, the rock, the one who'd always pick up that 3 a.m. crisis call. You just absorbed all the chaos, you listened to every problem, and you gave and you gave. But the thing is, as this slide points out, your own cup was never, ever filled in return. And eventually, something's got to give.
So what happened next? It wasn't some character flaw, it wasn't you suddenly turning cold, no. It was a highly evolved survival mechanism finally kicking into gear. This isn't about bitterness, it's about biology.
To really wrap our heads around this, psychologists look at something called polyvagal theory. The core idea is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Your nervous system is basically like a 24/7 surveillance system, always scanning your world and your relationships for clues. Are you safe or are you in danger?
So after all those years of overgiving, your system starts to see these draining relationships as a legitimate threat to your survival. It actually bypasses your thinking mind and flips a biological circuit breaker. It forces what's known as a dorsal vagal shutdown. You withdraw to conserve whatever precious emotional energy you have left before you completely burn out.
But wait, why is your nervous system so sensitive to this stuff in the first place? Well, for a lot of people, the blueprint was created a long, long time ago. Back in childhood, it's where you learned a fundamental lesson. Being alone equals being safe. Think about it. If you had to be hyper-aware of the moods of the grown-ups around you, you developed a pretty incredible skill. You became an expert at reading emotional currents. And you learned really early that getting close to people could be chaotic and maybe even a little dangerous.
There's a formal name for this. It was coined by the famous psychiatrist Dr. Murray Bowen. He called it emotional cutoff. It's basically a strategy you learn to manage overwhelming feelings. You figured out that the only place you were ever really truly safe was by yourself. But, and this is where we have to add a really crucial piece of nuance.
Because there is a massive difference between isolating yourself because you're scared and protecting yourself because you're wise. It's the difference between building a wall and building a fence.
A wall, you see, is built from fear. It keeps everybody out, and that leads to isolation. A fence, on the other hand, is built from self-respect. It has a gate. It lets you decide who gets to come in. That's not isolation, that is protection. And you've gotten really good at deciding who gets a key.
And this brings us to what might be your totally unrecognized superpower. Your old hypervigilance? It didn't just vanish, it evolved. You became a master at recognizing patterns. This is not paranoia. This is a highly refined skill that's based on thousands of hours of data.
Your brain's early warning system is just incredibly sophisticated. It knows the patterns instantly. You can see when that initial love bombing is going to lead to a huge crash. You feel that familiar rhythm of a friend who, surprise, only calls when they need a favor. When your system tells you a person is going to drain you, you finally learn to listen.
And this is exactly why the end result for you isn't loneliness, it's solitude. As you can see here, loneliness is like psychological starvation. It's wanting connection and not having it. But solitude? That's an intentional choice. It's about finding peace and richness and safety in the quiet, finally free from having to manage someone else's drama.
So if you've ever felt guilty about this, or if anyone has ever called you heartless, I want to leave you with some really powerful validation. And it comes from one of the most respected scientific studies in history.
Yeah, we're talking about the Harvard study of adult development. For 85 years, it has tracked the lives of hundreds of people to figure out what truly makes us happy. That's an incredible amount of data.
And here it is, the core finding. Real happiness isn't determined by the quantity of your relationships. It's about their quality and their safety. So if your circle is small, but it's full of people who respect your peace and actually fill your cup, you're not just doing it right, you're absolutely nailing it.
So just let that sink in. You learned the hard way that your peace is a precious and, yeah, expensive resource. You're not antisocial. You're not cold. You are simply a good guardian of your own energy, and you understand that not everyone has earned the right to share it.
Look, this isn't a story about running away from people. It's a story about running toward a version of yourself that simply refuses to live in chaos anymore. It's about building a sanctuary. So the final question I'll leave you with is this. Looking at your life right now, who has truly earned their seat at your table?